Oh, you think it was gonna happen with this? You think it was gonna magically go away in your room?
All right, we gotta work on this.
I wanted to talk to you about it, but I forgot. Part 2, part 1.
Mr. Higgins is on his way.
Okay, you wanna look down? Come on out.
Sliding down the hill.
I feel like it's Star Wars here with different screens.
I told you never to call me on that screen.
Can I have a
Hey,
motion to
Obi-Wan,
approve
no.
the minutes from the last meeting, please? Mr. What's your name?
O'Brien,
Brian?
Mr. Chairman.
A second? Mr. Joyce?
I'm not on the committee. One second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Sheriff,
He was here.
do you mind if we call you up now and
Well, I don't want
Pick
to jump in
through all
front of
your
the
items.
judge, but you did throw me under the bus.
no great death here? So it would be number 7 under previous business. Hi, get my text?
Oh, there he is.
Did you
So
slide down
number
the
7 is adopting amendments to the 2019-2023 capital program. This is one that could go.
That's 7?
This has, it has to be tabled because we couldn't deal with it addressed last night, right? So, did you have something that you wanted to say on this, I think?
Well,
Comment
it's
or-
pretty much the same information that I talked to the bonding committee the other night. I mean, we're at $10 million for a bond request. I know we started down, but obviously the initial request
Started
was.
at 5? or-
Started at 5, that was for the tower. Then, of course, once the new rules came out about fortifying the building and everything else, the price was going exponentially. We looked at leasing. Once we sat down and started to really talk about numbers, that proved just illogical to do. And then the county, again, would not own a 911 center. So, then we went to 8, and, they got into this new part of it that they have to build, has got to have 3-hour burn walls and everything else.
This is like a hardened
Yes,
silo now?
exactly, which I think is ridiculous, but the rules are the rules. So, we've pretty much locked down that, look, we're gonna be 10 and we're gonna be aggressive and go for grant funding. And, and we're gonna control the project. We're not gonna have any excessive spending. I don't need crazy walls outside fortifying the place and everything else. A fence is fine, and we'll be making other modifications. But again, what we have so far is just totally guesstimate. I mean, we saw a draft rendering of it, which was like in crayon. I mean, the thing is just a total guesstimate.
So, for information to members, we had the public hearing last night.
Yes.
Had to be called off because of the weather.
Right.
So we can't move ahead on this or on number 9, I believe it is, the bond for this project.
Right.
So we have to have the hearing next month, and then we'll proceed. So this should go, does anybody have any questions on it, Alan?
Well, I do, and I've had some conversations with the sheriff, and I'm glad to see that in the agenda further on, not only are we hiring an architect, but that we're hiring a construction manager. Because having lived through a number of Gilbane.
Gilbane.
Yeah, who was on site at the nursing home, familiar with the project, et cetera. But, this county has a history of project creep for cost. I mean, and we're sort of living it now, from 5 million to 7 million to 8 million. And now we say 10 million is still an estimate number. And I'm convinced that the sheriff, by hiring a construction manager who can sit down and say, this is the absolute top budget, will get the wherewithal to make value engineering judgments if they're necessary. There may come a time when someone comes to you and says, hey, the bidding climate is this, and we're now projecting that, and you're gonna have to make some tough decisions, but at least you'll have the right horsepower there. And I guess, you're as comfortable as you can be at 10,000, at $10 million.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to jump it to 12, and we're like, no, we're not getting into this. This is gonna be a $10 million project, we're gonna go after grant funding aggressively, and if we have to modify the building a little bit, we'll modify the building a little bit, but we're gonna
Okay.
control this.
Okay.
All right, so 7 and 9 are being tabled, correct, Sheriff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. 11 is next. I think this one is also being tabled at the request of the sheriff,
Right, and do
okay?
you want me to say anything on that, or no?
Yes.
All right,
Sure, yeah, please.
well, 11, this is for the, this was for the architect, the amendment with a cap not to exceed 835,000. Basically, it's, you know, obviously it all rolls 1, 2, 3 with the architect, the construction manager, the project itself. Again, we're pretty much capping ourselves at 10 million, but we want to go after grant funding, and we've already got $1 million that I spoke about earlier at public safety. So that's $1 million in, and we're going to continue to try to grab a couple more million to keep it off the taxpayers' back.
Can I just,
Ms. Willingham?
sorry, this is to piggyback, if I'm to understand correctly. This is for the project that change places out at the nursing home. And so 7 and 9 and 11 and 13?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, and that's for that same,
yeah, they're all the same. I had the public hearing go on last night, you know, we'd be in good shape, but we'll have to do this all again, I guess, in another month.
okay, so we're still using Gilbane. Aren't we using Gilbane anyway?
Gilbane? Gilbane is the project manager for the nursing home. That's
For the nursing home?
They're on site.
Okay, so they're on site, so and also the architect is the same?
Yeah.
Mr.
Thank you.
Bergdorf, would you like to pronounce that first again?
And Jerami.
Thank you very much.
And it makes a lot of sense to use the same professional team. They have site knowledge, they're already mobilized, they have detailed plans and specs, so there should have been some considerable savings in not having to pay someone to familiarize themselves with the project and the site.
Okay, so,
Thank you.
we're on 13, so, no, we're on 11, that's table, we need you to table 13 then too?
Yes, sir. This is for Gilbane.
So 11 and 13 are tabled.
13 would be for Gilbane for a
Right.
cap not to exceed 333,778. Again, they are on site, so it made a lot of sense to use them as our construction manager.
Okay, Wanda brought us up to 13, so that's also being tabled. Now, we can do 14, we can move ahead with 14. Do I have a motion
Yes.
on 14? Mr. O'Brien, second Mr. Joyce, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. What other, we have 15, we have a bunch of them here.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
15,
say anything about 14?
No. Passed. Amending the 2019 Sheriff's Office budget E91 communication funds.
Yes, this is 652,000 for, it'll be for equipment and software for Motorola with the end of the new project. This is the last year that we will have to pay the whole price. Next year, Albany will pay a third, Colony will pay a third, and we will share it, so it'll be 2 and change, which will be a savings for us. But this is, this completes all the licensing, everything for the interoperable project. And it's coming out of surcharge.
That's 14? Or are we talking about 15?
This is
Motion.
14.
So we're on 15 now.
14.
We just,
14? No, I got
Oh, did
that.
you-
that was
I
15.
think we passed that unanimously.
That was 15?
14 we passed.
15, do I have a motion? Ms. Willingham, second Mr. Joyce, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. 16, amending the 2019 Sheriff's Office budget administrative adjustments.
The money was budgeted, but the new commander of EMT, Dennis Wood, didn't know that he had to get actual control numbers for the new positions. This is all reimbursed by the towns. Again, the money's in the budget, we're just creating the 2 titles so they can use the money.
Motion, Mr. O'Brien, second Mr. Joyce, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 17, authorization to accept grant fund, this is your agenda tonight. Grant funding and enter into an agreement with the New York State Office of the Attorney General regarding the CAMS body-worn camera program and amending the 2019 Sheriff's Office budget.
So our awesome new Attorney General has given us $69,000 for body cameras. We will be purchasing servers and new cameras for that. I made an in-house decision to not only take the $69,000, which was going to give us 43 body cameras and servers. We made the decision to throw in a bunch of asset forfeiture money. So the whole project now is going to cost $243,000. We're purchasing about 170 body cameras and the infrastructure to record and maintain. We will have body cameras inside the jail on everybody. We will have body cameras on our law enforcement. I am even putting body cameras on our EMTs and paramedics.
And how many personnel is that?
It'll be about 180, on any given time. Obviously,
So
the whole department's much bigger.
Okay, so they'll be transferred from one officer to another person off.
Yeah, they'll have
Depending
to,
on-
at the jail, we'll have some extras, on the road there'll be extras, but they'll last 16 hours of recording in 720 high def, so will have plenty of video, plenty of time, plenty of batteries.
Mr. Bergdorf,
Yeah, I
Ms.
just
Willingham,
couldn't-
then Ms. Willingham. Mr.
Oh,
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, you said 180, and you said at the jail. Who's wearing them at the jail?
Nobody yet, but as soon as we get them, every correction officer at the jail will have one when they work.
Ooh. Okay, that's my question.
One of the things that we've heard is that the digital storage of all this tape. Have you developed a policy for how long you're going to keep digital records and how you're going to archive them? And
We're pretty much done with the policy. We got some tweaking, we've got our lawyers looking at it. We worked real close with Information Services, who did an awesome job on this to spec out the servers. We're gonna house a server here, we're gonna house it at the jail, because obviously we're talking about a lot of video. But again, certain incidents will be held indefinitely, car accidents, things like that. Assaults on staff will be held, things like that. But there'll be different timeframes, but we've got a pretty in-depth policy. We'll be the first correctional facility, I believe, in this entire area. I know there are a couple county jails using them, much smaller. So our rollout is gonna be, it's a heavy lift, but it's time, and my focus is on the jail not as much as the patrol. I might as well do the whole department, let's get it done.
How is the maintenance of these cameras?
Very minimal, believe it or not. We went with an upgraded camera, we went with a ruggedized camera, we went with a camera that's gonna be warranted for 5 years. At 5 years, I'm sure the technology will be, twice as good as it is now. So, the biggest part of it, I think we got Panasonic down to about 7 and change on the camera. Most of it is the hardware, the storage, but we wanted a few things that were special, like if the officers are running to an alarm, the minute the alarm goes off, it ignites all of the cameras and turns everything on, no matter where you are. So we think that's gonna help our officers, we think it's also a good thing for the inmates, and it's money well spent.
Do I have a motion?
I got a couple questions.
You have a
Yeah,
question?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, when a sheriff deputy pulls somebody over, and he goes up to the car and starts talking with them, is that all being recorded?
Right now, it all depends which car it is. We don't have body cameras, we have in-car cameras. We just
okay.
bought, I think, 9 or 10 of them last year, we budgeted and had them installed. But again, if that car is down and they have to use a replacement car, it may not be recorded.
But it's your plan to put these cameras on every officer? or-
That's correct.
Okay, so in the future, and by the way, when will this happen?
The order was signed today, so we're hoping that we'll get a rollout within the next 60 to 90 days.
Okay, so in the next 60 or 90 days, your sheriff deputies on patrol will have this camera, and they will
Correct.
approach a car, and the person will be recorded when they're
Correct.
in interaction. I do have a concern, a privacy concern about that, because that is a public document, isn't it?
Yes.
So anyone who gets pulled over, theoretically, their interaction could be foiled. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I would have to ask the county attorney for an opinion on that, because if you think about it, sir, we're also going to be doing this with EMTs and paramedics.
Oh, yeah, I
So,
wondered about
you're
that,
going to be
too.
talking about some HIPAA things, but there are other agencies in the nation doing it. So it's not like, we're the first ones at that.
there's states
We'll
done it,
have
for
to make sure that our policies reflect the privacy and the confidentiality that everybody is due. But there may be instances where, an interaction is released. So I want to have the county attorney engage on that a little bit. We've got a policy that's probably 99% ready for a stamp, but we'll see where we go with it. But yeah, I think it's time that everybody, listen, everybody's recording everybody at this point, and it's long overdue that we just didn't have the funding capabilities. With the new AG, she gave us $70,000 jump, and it's time.
Yeah, I think that's something that really needs to be worked through, because this is when, say, the average citizen has interaction with police officers, most likely on a traffic situation. And I'm wondering if they're gonna be aware that every conversation is apparently gonna be taped, and if it is, electronic documents are documents, electronic tape. So I'm
Body
curious what the
cameras right
law
now,
is.
law enforcement locally, or like Albany has them. I know Gilderland's using them. I think Colony has them now. So, there's policies in place, and obviously we'll be checking with them, and the attorneys will be checking with them. Our primary focus was actually the correctional facility.
Ms. Williams?
Okay, just very quick. So, I'm not sure if you're the right person to be asking this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So when a coroner is called, that could be anywhere in.
We're off the body camera topic.
Well, I don't know, I'm getting ready to ask that question.
She's coming back.
Yeah, okay. So, well, you just talked about everybody being, so is there, depending upon where they are in the county, is a sheriff called, or, I don't know how that works. So, do they have to call a coroner for every time who calls the coroner?
We call the coroner.
You call the coroner.
It all depends, well, if we're handling the case. If
Right,
it's
right,
somebody
that-
down on South Pearl Street, Albany PD will call the coroner.
Right.
Sometimes the coroner will come out, sometimes the coroner will not. If the doctor, if they can get in touch with the doctor and the doctor will sign off, coroner may not come out.
So now, back to my question now. You said that, let's talk about sheriffs.
Okay.
Sheriffs are going to have the cameras on, and going back to what the question is. Sheriff is gonna have on the camera all the time. Is that for every situation that they're in?
Well, yes, but there will also be times like, all right, we're talking about coroner. So
Right.
we get to a house and there's, they go in the house, they clear the house is safe, we have a dead body. At some point, he can turn that off. They're not on all the time. The officer can turn them off. It depends how your policy is written.
Well, that's kind of deep. It just sounds like it's getting, I don't know. That sounds really.
So Public Safety Committee has already signed off on.
We already approved
Policy.
the grant application months ago. This is the money coming from the grant
Right.
application.
Okay.
So
I
they
just-
substantively reviewed.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
I'm just trying
I
to,
don't know. I was just trying to
So
figure out.
I don't understand what you mean, that's kind of
Okay,
deep.
as he asked a question in regards to the legality of it as far as, people are concerned and all of that, so, maybe it's not a topic for now, but I'm getting at.
Well, the
so-
attorneys, you said the county attorney is working on, is signing off on the procedure, correct?
We want them to review our
Yeah.
policy
So-
and procedure to
Okay,
make
all right,
sure
thank
that
you.
everything's,
I mean, it's
I
a
just
new,
wanted to know how far it's gonna go.
it's a new area of law, and
Right.
it's gonna be very controversial, I can tell you that right now, because these folks are, I believe these things are gonna be, at some point, available to the public, because that's the whole point of this, is to give the public eye. Does the officer have discretion to turn off the camera
yes,
at a stop?
yes,
Somebody might say, can I speak to you
Yes.
privately or something?
yes.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna be very interesting.
We move on, please.
member is okay with moving ahead with this? Do I have a motion then?
Sick.
Mr. Higgins, second by Mr. Ferdorf. All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you, Sheriff. The last one, 18 for you. Amending the 2019 Sheriff's Office budget, interoperable communication.
This is to receive $217,000. Again, it'll go towards licensing and interoperability.
This is it, this is the last piece, right?
Um,
All the years?
Well, no, we're gonna continue to get this money in, absolutely. A lot of these funds that we've been able to, I hate to say stockpile, but we have put a lot of these funds in. Out of that whole radio project, we've received something like $9 million in grant funding. So we're hoping to do the same in the construction of the 911 center. Use the grant funding, use the bonding for the bricks and mortar, and the grant funding for the furniture and the new computers and everything else that's gonna have to go in there. And it'll all tie into the new 800 megahertz radio system.
Questions? Members, others?
But these are reoccurring funds.
Motion? Motion. Mr. Mr. Joyce, second, Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, have a great night, stay warm.
All right, let's go back to previous business. Number 1, resolution number 232, sponsor here. No, lay that aside. Number 2, resolution number 280, authorizing Albany County's participation in the sales tax-free week. This is sponsored here.
Mr. Fenier.
Mr. Fernier, the new sponsor, no? Table. Resolution number 333, repealing resolution number 445 of 2016, establishing, that is being withdrawn at the request of the sponsor. Number 4, resolution number 337, update and create an Albany County master water. Also tabled, sponsor is not present. Number 5, local law number R for 2018, the local law of the County of Albany, New York, prohibiting Albany County government from assisting. That is also tabled, the sponsor is not here. Number 6, resolution number 376, public hearing on local law, we cannot move ahead on that. That's tabled. Number 7 is also tabled.
No, yeah.
That was
Because,
We already did
Oh, you
that.
did it, yeah.
That was
I'm
shared.
afraid to take it off.
Adopting amendments, number 8, adopting amendments to the 2019-2023 capital program. This also has to be tabled
Who's
because it was
that?
not a public hearing yet.
Oh,
Number 9, we already tabled. Number 10, adopting an updated disposition plan, Mike, by Albany County for real property acquired. Want to speak to this, number 10?
Mr. Chairman, I'll say kind of
Process.
briefly, thank you for having me briefly what I said last time. This is the product that was developed out of the real property task force that the chairman put together. The product you see in front of you came from Legislator Drake and Legislator Chapman, and they were kind enough to engage our office, Division of Finance, which I'm sure you all know is intimately involved in property, as well as the Department of Law. The product you see in front of you has been fully vetted through the Department of Law, so I submit it for your consideration. I'm sure the legislator has plenty of things to say.
Drake, you have anything you want to?
No, it was well said, Mr. McLaughlin. Just to add that this is a collaborative effort over a course of several months of meetings with representatives in the room from everyone from the majority, the minority, the chairman's office, finance, the executive's office, so on and so forth. Everybody was there. This is we're proud of this effort, and we hope that we move this through.
Well, thank you for your work on this, and thank you for being here tonight and speak to us.
Thank you.
Any questions from members? Mr. Higgins?
Yeah, I guess I'm just interested, and I said this to you via email, why there is this section where private economic development purposes take precedence over the transfer of properties to land bank, and how that term is defined. I didn't notice that it's defined in this policy, and I'd like to see what it means. Is there a definition? Are these projects that are over $20,000, $50,000? I mean, this is very broad the way it's written.
You want to take this one?
Sure. So, in our conversations, many legislators voiced basically the desire for this policy to be able to be utilized for the purposes of economic development. And when those, I mean, I guess this kind of comes with experience at the various types of properties that come to the county through foreclosure, by putting in too many, whether it be threshold for a value or something like that, there's always a consideration, or not always, but frequently a consideration with a property that a legislator, the legislature may want to consider for the purpose of economic development, that if you define it in the economic development section too narrowly, it automatically takes it out and eliminates your ability to do it. So there seemed to be the desire to keep things more broad to accommodate all the various random situations that come up in foreclosure.
I guess, but there's, like, who determines whether it's an economic development purpose?
Yeah, the legislature.
We would vote on it as a legislature, and the reason, as Mr. McLaughlin spoke to, putting in a random threshold could create issues. I mean, very often, a vacant 20 by 50 lot might be integral to a development process, might have a street value of $500. So we don't know what the value of a property might be.
And what happens if a project, you know, somebody, we transfer the project, I understand there's a reverter in here, but there's no specific metrics that need to be met by the business or whatever it is, not-for-profit that's acquiring the property.
Well, that's up to the
Right,
discretion of the committee and of the Conservation Committee and then the legislature, because we don't know what those requirements might be. So if the requirements are to meet a certain standard, for example, I'm gonna make this up, but we're gonna build a community center, or, you know, we're gonna build a gymnasium that's also supposed to be open to the community, and the developer doesn't do that. That would be an example of a reverter. You know, we would put that in there, because the reason that the public good has been taken into account here is because we're gonna offer something to the public.
Who makes the decision on whether or not the property has failed to meet that definition
So we
down
have.
the line?
So, first and
There's
foremost,
nothing
we can
in
make the
here.
blanket statement about this new policy that there's no transfer of any property regardless of this land bank for any other purpose that can happen without approval of the legislature. All strings attached to any transfer can be determined by the legislature. So, we didn't receive any suggestions related to what sort of metrics we should use. We could have included them in the policy had we received them. But more importantly, you know, the reverter has always been the tool by which the legislature has enforced those,
Right, but what are
those
the
requirements.
criteria by which we decide to execute the reverter?
That's right.
Is what-
And then we've always had our Department of General Services, who has many individuals equipped to assess whether investments have been made, as was the case with our sealed bid auctions, go out and make those assessments and then release the
So
reverter.
on the
So,
front end, we can put whatever criteria we deem advisable that's in a particular resolution that we pass that you're referring to. So
Right.
we can do, basically, we're doing policy, but it's still case by case.
It's still
Yeah.
case by case. This,
So-
sort of the back up here, Mr. Chairman, the idea is here to lay out a very sort of a clean progression of process. This isn't to solve all the problems that might come up, this isn't to state what
Right.
these properties might be used for. This is just to outline a clear process and take away some of the mess that was
The
involved.
expectations are for,
Yeah.
all right. So-
and there's also quite a bit of transparency added into this plan that wasn't in the
Correct.
previous.
So something is gonna come to us from you or from our members to address, and then we're gonna look at it, Chris, right, and say, well, in this case, we need, you know, these considerations seem to apply, so we ought to put those in especially.
And this needs to go through the
And then
conservation
do the-
improvement.
Then do the revert, then say, if you don't comply, we're
Let me
gonna have.
ask you this, how many properties has the county ever executed a reverter on and taken acquisition back?
We had, in my time here, we've never had to.
No?
In my time here. If I could also add to something for Legislator's question. I really think that, for example, for economic development, the new plan basically requires that in the absence of any auction, a property can't go out for bid anymore, or excuse me, can't go out for public consideration anymore. So one concern that a lot of legislators had was, well, we want to avoid the appearance that we're picking somebody over another for economic development purposes, which is why now we're required, on my end of things, to make sure that there's an advertisement or a public notice that this property is going to be put up for direct sale, so that the public will have the ability to see that's happening, and if somebody would like to put in a competing offer, they can come forward and say that. Now, the reason we did that instead of just saying everything goes to land bank is because I have a lot of properties that just sit and maybe withdrawn properties for environmental concerns and never had the opportunity. So it seemed like a perfect way to kind of achieve what everybody wanted while also allowing for those unique circumstances.
If I could add, it was very important to us as the committee, and me in particular, that we have a public notification. That'll be found under the section that says properties discretionally conveyed. Section A, it indicates that it must be notified. Public notification of the property proposed for private sale shall be made through all appropriate means, parenthetically, newspaper, website, etc. The idea being that it's transparency. We're gonna still have options with these properties, but we're gonna do it with a clear guideline of how to do it. It's open to the public and it's understood.
So, in the early 2000s, there was a piece of property along the Normanskill, which we ended up giving to the Albany County Land Conservancy, which has since changed its name to the Hudson Mohawk Land Conservancy.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was along a waterway, it was a special piece of property. And the legislature was able to exercise its discretion to to send it to a certain
Yeah.
entity to take care of it. We still have those kinds of
Yep.
criteria in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conservation is a specific example. Yep.
Mr. Higgins?
Just another question. In drafting and formulating the policy, did you guys reach out to the land bank and its board of directors
Yes.
and executive
Yes.
director? Have they signed off on this?
Yes.
Also, I failed to mention in the room, and Tony, everyone knows Tony DeLello and all those folks who've been working and living this for years, but also Adam Zarenko did come in and meet with us. Also at the time, was Jeff Neal and a number of people with a lot of institutional understanding. So all those stakeholders were present, which is the way I personally like to do legislative business.
All right, I'd like to move ahead with this. If you have amendments, Chris, feel free, okay? I mean, we'll come up with something in the meantime.
If I can make one request, if amendments are made, that's great. I would ask that if there's some way we could work with law to make sure that they're vetted, because the previous policy was deemed to be problematic by our Department of Law, so if we can, they've been great in terms of incorporating all these changes that we've received. If we
Well,
continue
the chair
that
of the law
process, that would
committee
be.
could talk with, and
Super.
that's fine with me.
Okay.
Do I have a motion? Mr. O'Brien, second by Ms. Willingham, all those in favor? Opposed?
No.
Mr. Higgins is in the negative. Paul also is positive. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Number 12, Judge, come on up. All right,
Poor guy.
this is authorization to enter into an agreement with the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services regarding the upstate quality improvement and caseload reduction grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Public Defender's Office won a competitive grant from the Office of Indigent Legal Services for the purpose of hiring a single attorney. It's a $300,000, not a year, grant over 3 years for salary and fringe, and it's for caseload reduction purposes. This would be a floating attorney that would handle caseload pile-ups in the various courts and have some felony assignments as well.
Multiple courts at the same time.
Multiple courts, juggling.
Mr. Higgins.
What's the average caseload now? Per attorney?
I'd have to find that out and get back to you, because I don't have that number. It's, we've been adding attorneys and now we've lost some attorneys, and it depends on surges. And we had a big surge this summer of violent felonies. Things went way up. I'd have to get that, and I will get that if you'd like it.
Set? Mr. Grimm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're adding a new attorney for the office, or is the attorney just available?
No, it would be in the office, paid for by the grant.
So the grant is for how long then?
It's 3 years at this
It's
point.
100 grand? Now, will that person, if the grant isn't continued, that person understands that there's no
Absolutely.
position?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
For turnover, we'd like the opportunities. Yes, Mr. Joyce. Motion to move by Mr. Joyce, second Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
All right, we're jumping down to 19, pick up where we left off. Public hearing on amending the 2019-23 capital program. Tina?
Good evening, Mr.
Good evening.
How are you? General Services had put out a, through CT Mail, our engineering firm that's on retainer and from another bid, to do an assessment of the Times Union Garage. Under this assessment, they came back with a bunch of priority repairs that had to be made, also insurance repairs that had to be made. Right now, they total up to $4.2 million. to get these done. There's a new code that's being enforced now. It's a new code that came out back from New York State about parking garages where they have to be inspected, engineered every 3 years. Ours is actually,
And how many times have we had it inspected and engineered?
I would have to get that information, but this, in my time here in General Services, I think this is the first one we've done as far as an assessment
Wow.
goes of the garage. And they came back with the
Do you assure
recommendation.
our public that it is
I won't
safe
be
right
going in
now?
that garage
and
anytime
Stable future,
Can I assure that it's safe right now?
or, yeah.
19.
According to them, yes, it is safe right now.
For the moment.
But these repairs that they're recommending should be done within a year that they're recommending. This goes back to our original plan to do the top deck, the caulking, all of that, and get the elevators back, the vertical transportation back up and running the way it should be and modernize that. Once this plan came through, we realized that because of the lack of maintenance that was done on the top deck of that garage, there's a lot of T's that need to be replaced, there's a lot of structural repairs that need to be made for this garage.
Thing leaked down from the top to the.
Correct. It gets into the T's, it gets into, and starts spoiling your concrete repairs. It was an in-depth report, it was by CT Mail, they brought on a special consultant that does nothing but garages, along with WTI. They actually are a state contractor, along with a place called Tremco.
Yeah, they never did PM on it.
And the pricing that we got from
Built it and
this original,
now we're paying.
in your packet, there's an original pricing in there. That was considered to be, because it was done that way, it was considered to be more of a build design. So the pricing in here is pretty close to what it's gonna cost us, but we're gonna have CT Mail do all the construction drawings and the construction management of it, and then, but we'll be putting this out for a public bid for the general construction work of it.
So
New elevator?
fiscally, how many floors are we gonna be taking out of service at a time?
It's gonna be
Revenue,
phased, that's one of the problems, it's gonna be phased. The garage will never shut down, like, they'll maybe shut down like,
I assume it's
half of
phased.
the thing, and then work on that, so it's a phasing process that goes along
So
with this.
bottom up, so you don't have
It's
stuff
gonna be
falling
top down.
Except, because you're gonna have nets and everything else that.
Yeah, it's gonna be top down. The biggest priority right now is to get that top deck sealed from all water penetration, so at least down, that way we can start working on the elevators at the same time we're doing that top deck. So we'll be all set there to go, and then just work our way down. And then, there also in this proposal too is actually a maintenance aspect of it. That could be a 3 to 5 year plan down the road, that could actually be implemented later on. But the priorities there, these are priority ones that we should really take care of within the next year.
Yeah, so we're gonna lose revenue while we take out.
I don't believe we should lose that much revenue. A lot of some of it's gonna be done about night work, weekend work, and during the day. So, where there's not, but there's gonna be constraints as far as when we have concerts and stuff like that, when it can work, when it can't
You
work.
gotta do it, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Bergdorf?
Yeah, I sat in and I listened to the capital projects discussion of this. And one of the things that sort of bothered me, and I realize nobody likes to spend money on infrastructure, but if we're sitting here and we've come to the realization that for 12 years we didn't do any inspections and we didn't do any maintenance, and now all of a sudden an $875,000 project is going to cost us $4,375,000. I hope that we are taking a good hard look at what an annual preventative maintenance program should be. And we find a priority way to build that in to the expenditures.
Yes, that's one of our plans now, but we're just trying to get the immediate.
I understand, this is a recapture, but we obviously made some mistakes here over time, and we're paying the price. The other question is, if we're talking about phasing this and taking half of it out or a floor out, there's obviously got to be an impact to revenue. So there, I mean, unless the place is half empty every day.
Well, the thing is it really the top deck, most of the top deck is usually empty every day. Okay, so what will happen is we'll be phasing that, we'll be shifting like a half a deck up. So the top deck will be, if you go on there any given day, if you got 3 cars up there on a day on the top deck, you're lucky. You know, the garage is actually, and a lot of it is monthly parkers. So you always have room in there in the garage. The garage is never filled to capacity unless it's a show.
Okay.
So the shows, you know, they would, you know, you might phase it where you can park them where they're working. That's something
Well,
that's gonna be worked into the plan.
I guess that was the next point that I was gonna get to, is I know I don't realize what the components of the revenue stream for the garage are. Obviously, you've got daily parkers, you've got monthly parkers, you've got transients that come in for shows, and each one of them is a specific revenue stream. I think you need to make a very thorough analysis as to what the proper rates should be to make this a self-sustaining structure. So we don't find ourselves 5 years from now going through, gee, you know, you wanted to do $800,000 worth of preventative maintenance, but the budget got tight, so it fell out. And now we haven't done it again.
You'd have a reserve that would
Yeah.
come out of the proceeds of the parking garage. Mike, are you gonna be looking at, down where the old convention center site was supposed to be, so we can lease some land while this thing is going on?
I can certainly raise it with Kenny's
Or
extra.
purchase them and build a new garage
Yeah,
down there?
I mean, I don't think
Take this
that's-
one out of service completely and do it right?
Do a shuttle, do a shuttle back and forth.
Well, we can look into it for you, sure.
It might be
The other,
better, it might be
And-
cost effective to close it
And what about Mr.
down.
Reinhardt's solar on top of the, that top deck there?
Well, we had looked into the solar a few times on that. The cost of the solar to put on there wasn't really prohibitive to what we were going to get out of it at that pricing. It's starting to come down.
That top, right.
We're looking at it now at the
Top deck
nursing
full.
home, the same type of thing at the nursing home. We're looking to do
Structurally,
it
we
at the
can't
nursing
do
home.
it structurally.
Once CT Mail gets done with those and that they're doing a solar study there, we'll know pricing on what those stalls would actually cost us. So we will have a better
Just giving you a
idea.
heads up,
But then
because
again,
it's gonna be
it's a weight factor too. You got the, you know, the garage, we don't know what the weight factor is on there. Like, one time we wanted to put a generator on there, we knew it wouldn't handle the weight of a generator. You know, when you're talking to car stalls and stuff like that, you're talking a lot of steel, depending how many you put on there. Would I put it on there right now with the way the garage is? No. Later on, after the garage.
If nobody uses up top, then you can just
Well,
make the
that's-
floor itself be solar, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Berger?
I'm just, I participated in one long-term purchase and rental of spaces in a parking garage, and that was when the dormitory authority ended up getting the second deck of the parking garage between the bank and the federal post office. And part of that was a 20-year condo lease where you own the spaces for 20 years and you actually had to pay into a fund every year, which was sort of like a depreciation reserve fund, which created a pool of money to refinish and refurbish the deck. And I really wish there were, obviously the parking authority was sophisticated enough back in the late 90s to figure out a way to do that. So there are people who operate garages who this is not rocket science. I would suggest you might want to take a look at
Outside
that.
the box thinking here on.
Have you spoken to the commissioner of the Albany Parking Authority with some ideas on maybe sharing some space? I think it would be to our advantage to close it down, cost effective, close it down and redo the whole thing at the same time, rather than trying to shuffle. You're dealing with insurance claims, you're dealing with people sliding, slipping. It's a headache. I lived through the.
Professionals here that maybe you guys could, you know.
I lived through the OGS parking mess. It was awful.
I mean, that's certainly something we could look at. Like I said, Once we do this and we can get CT Mail on board to do the construction documents and the phasing of it, we'll have a better idea of their phasing plan, because we all know this has to be phased. So that's part of this aspect. We don't know how, we know it's gonna take quite a bit of time, but we don't know the phasing of it and what we're going to be losing the revenue as far as any kind of that aspect of it
Along
right
Mr.
now.
Bergdorf, are any of the box holders at the Civic Center, do they get parking spots coming with those boxes? I've never heard of
That I would have to check into, I could get back to you on that.
Hard no? Okay. Hard no.
So, there's all kinds of options.
Yeah.
There are revenue opportunities here.
Revenue opportunities, but also ways to set up a fund for future maintenance.
Parking spots.
But as far as the phasing, we can do when we do this, we can set the phasing whatever we want. We could just tell them not work only. You know what I mean? Isn't that what, it might, your project cost shouldn't go up because you're not putting 2 shifts on. You're just saying, look, this is the way it is. And these companies have done a lot of this, so they know how to phase these.
All right, so this is to move ahead on a public hearing.
Correct.
So I have a motion to Mr. O'Brien, second by Mr. Bergdorf, and she had lots of contributors to hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So we're moving that ahead with the public hearing. The next one we have to table because obviously we have to have the public hearing first, so we can't adopt the amendments just yet. Anything else that you have on the agenda here?
Just the next one, the Homeland
Do you
Security
have
grant.
Homeland Security?
Yes.
Okay, number 21, authorizing the appropriation of grant funding regarding the New York State Homeland Security Grant Program.
This is just to reappropriate for the 3rd year the leftover money that we've been using on a 3-year grant. So we're just asking to just reappropriate. It comes out to about, I think there's about $57,000 left in there to reappropriate for use of projects.
Motion, Mr. O'Brien, second. Mr. Joyce, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Chairman.
If you have any thoughts on this, we're certainly willing to entertain it.
I will. Thank you.
22, authorizing the conveyance of real property located at Pinnacle Road. And Laughlin again.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Riley is the expert on this one.
Dave?
So, Mr. Chairman, our office was contacted by Mr. Lenseth as he was purchasing 348 Pinnacle Road in New Scotland. It's up on Thatcher Park. When he was doing his due diligence on the property, he realized that it was a 15-acre parcel. On the original deed, it was recorded as a 15-acre parcel in New Scotland and a 1-acre parcel in the town of Bern. Turns out that the 1-acre parcel in the town of Bern had been foreclosed upon by the county back in the 90s. So we've owned it since then. We've tried to auction it off several times. There's never been a buyer. It's landlocked. There's no access to it. It just had no value to anyone but the abutting owner. The previous owner had no desire to reacquire it. I don't even think they were aware that it had been foreclosed upon, at least through their comments in his due diligence. So he approached us to reunite the 2 properties, get it back on the tax rolls. He wants to put it into productive use. He's gonna do some dairy, or some cattle up there, some farming, agricultural use, so.
Questions? Motion, Mr. Higgins, second, Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Unanimous. 23, authorizing the conveyance of real property located at 142 Green Street in the city of Laughlin.
Chairman, we're asking for the transfer of property to Mr. Patrick Chu. For those of you, whoever look to your left, going north on 787 past Albany, you will notice an old derelict church with not much of a roof left. It has gone to auction a couple times, most recently purchased by World Unity Corporation, which proceeded to go several years without doing anything with it. And property is currently in withdrawn status for the condition reasons, as well as a collapse that's occurred on the property, which has some of the hallmarks that we've observed in other properties of a potential underground tank of some sort. And so the individual that approached us asking for a transfer of the property has a demonstrated history of taking properties in this condition and refurbishing them to productive use. Seemed to us like a opportunity to avoid a situation like occurred on Broadway several months ago, which was a several $100,000 demolition, and get the building into the proven hands of somebody who
But
can
not
do something
only
with it.
possibility of demolition, but a tank, did I hear you say?
Correct. Yes, we can't verify that, because if we do, the federal and state authorities then say we're taking ownership of it.
Gotcha. Mr. Higgins?
When you say proven track record of development, can you provide us with some examples?
Yes, there's some examples within in the packet of several properties that he's acquired either from the land bank and through private sale and rehabbed them.
What's the investment in the property to stabilize it, to bring it back?
Well, he says that he would need to invest $2 million, excuse me, to bring it back to productive use.
What's the guarantee we have that he's going to be any different than the previous?
It would be no different than the previous ones. A right of reverter would be
So
put
we have a
into.
reverter.
Yep, and then we would have our DGS folks, our code guys go out and make sure that he's actually,
And what would, if I, back to the earlier discussion we had with Mr. Higgins, what would trigger the reverter?
a release of it or a trigger that we would take, well, if it sits for another year without anything done to it, that would trigger the reverter.
Yeah, and what happens if he's buying something on the property that he doesn't like?
He's
his.
expecting
Decides not to
to
It's
invest
his
anymore
then,
in it?
He's expecting to find issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, but.
Again, that would be the reverter, so if it goes longer than, we deem appropriate, then we can initiate the
So
reverter.
if we don't convey it, we got it,
Yeah,
right? This is the possibility of conveying it and having it back on the rolls at some point and saving that building.
this is technically what would happen if we don't do this or we don't find somebody else to take the
Well, it's
property
got
from us.
demolition
We aren't gonna
costs.
take deed title of the property for the reasons that we listed. If the property gets to a point where it's structurally unsound, the city of Albany will declare an emergency, take the building down. That charge will then be levied against the owner. After a year, it will then roll under the tax bill. We will then make the city whole for that cost, including interest, and then we will auction an empty lot, which will be.
Ms. Willingham, you had a question?
Okay, so, so these people, this,
Patrick Chu.
Patrick Chu.
Yep, Ms.
So, do you have any, does he have any history of any development? I mean,
Tons. So specifically, the ones that come to mind is behind us is the Beaver Lofts. That was the old Reliable Meats, if folks remember. He took those properties and fully rehabilitated them. He brought a property from us at auction when I was very new here up on Western Avenue that was in very bad shape, didn't have a back of the building, and rehabbed it into apartments. Up on Henry Johnson, he recently took an old building on the corner of Henry Johnson by the police station and made it into a laundromat. He owns a property on the corner of, well, right down here on the corner in downtown Albany. He rehabbed all the buildings on 800 Broadway block across from the newer gas station as you go under the overpass for the trains on Broadway, I believe.
So the property's appraised at what?
The property appraised at 30,000, he's
Based on
offering
what?
10.
I know he's offering less, but what's 30,000 based on?
What's your counter offer?
A building that they collapse and they have a tank in
Let's
it.
make
Well,
deal.
it's built, it's based
Why is it
on,
based on, who appraised it at 30,000?
Mike, his gentleman's name's Mike Demuro, we have an appraisal firm on retainer.
Alvin Demira is
Alvin
the-
Demuro, oh, thank you,
But
Alvin.
it's appraised at 30,000 as is,
Correct,
which
So let me-
may not be his much longer.
correct.
Can
So
I-
so
can I finish?
for $10,000,
So this would fall into the, if this was a
potential
property.
investment of $2 million.
If this were not a withdrawn parcel, we would demand appraised value, but no different than Jace Court, 26 Jace Court.
Yep.
We generally come to you with offers that are at least in the ballpark of appraised value with a withdrawn parcel because of the potential benefit to the county.
Can I say something? Can I finish?
Yeah,
Okay, okay, so, all right. There is no laundromat on Henry Johnson Boulevard. But anyway, past that, I know. Okay,
It's brand new.
it popped up yesterday then, but anyway. So he's going to invest $2 million into that old church and turn it into a food hall?
That's what he'd like to do, yes.
Interesting.
As opposed to it falling down, I suppose, yes. Mr. Higgins.
So let me just ask you a question. We just approved this new land disposition policy, so that this would be considered a transfer for economic development purposes, I would assume?
Could be.
And that policy requires that we get the fair market value, which would be the $30,000. So why wouldn't we pass the policy first, then follow the policy for this specific transfer of property?
This could also be considered a transfer of a conditional property, in which case the legislature would have jurisdiction to transfer for below market value.
I just see, the irony here to me is comical. We're gonna pass a policy, enact it, and then we're gonna immediately violate the policy by transferring this building to, somebody else because they have an offer. I mean, we've seen this song and dance before.
I mean, the policy hasn't passed yet, and with all due respect, the disposition plan was actually submitted to the legislature last year and could have been passed by now.
Yeah, but it didn't, but we have.
And this was also
But we have a reverter clause, we have $2 million possibly on the table. How the members do it. Burglar.
If somebody were to put $2 million into this piece of property under private ownership, what would the likely assessment be?
Much higher.
Significantly over $30,000. So is there
Negotiation on that.
is there, excuse me?
Unless there's some negotiation on that,
Maybe the
on
idea.
property taxes,
Well,
If they're gonna put a $2
unless
million investment in
there's some IDA loan with an abatement or something like that, I guess that could always happen.
Track record.
But,
Any other?
I mean, there seems to be a potential here for a huge upside.
That's our view. That's why we're putting it forward for consideration.
This is the parcel that's gone to
Yeah.
auction numerous times.
Motion by Mr. Joyce to
Move it.
support this, second by Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mr. Higgins? Opposed? Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. That was number 23. Now we're on to 24, amending the 2019 Albany County budget administrative adjustments. Budget Director?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Whatever.
This is, at the end of the year, we find that we have some lines that need to be corrected due to collective bargaining agreements or did not do their 2% cost of living adjustments, and this is just to clean up for that.
Net neutral?
Yep.
Okay, those are the magic words. Questions?
No, let's,
Move it, Mr. Joyce, second, Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. 25, amending resolution number 542 for 2018 regarding chemical dependency services and amending the 2019. Commissioner, welcome.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to amend the 2019 budget. It's a state aid pass-through funding contract. The New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services has given us more money to give to the Addiction Care Center of Albany for a additional position on their billing staff. It's 100% state funded.
100% state funded, also the magic words. Questions? Move it, Mr. Joyce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Brian is seconded. All unanimous?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. 26 also. Okay. Amending resolution 543. Go ahead.
Shall I start with the magic words? It's
Yes.
it's 100%.
Okay, it doesn't hurt. It never hurts.
It's
Never hurts.
100%
Motion, Mr.
100%,
Joyce,
let's move it.
second by Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor?
Aye, bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The advantage of being at the
Thanks
end
for your
of the meeting.
patience, Doctor. Had to wait all night for that.
27, authorizing an agreement with New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Program. Go ahead.
Evening, the commissioner was here, unfortunately had to step out on a family matter, so I'm gonna fill in for her. This is a, excuse me, budget amendment request. The department budgeted their expected amount they were gonna receive for this grant. Based on previous year's track record, they actually got a bit more, I think 15 or 20,000 more. So
Also magic words.
this is a budget amendment to accept that additional funding.
Motion, Mr. O'Brien, second, Ms. Willingham, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. 28, amending resolution number 115 for 2018. This has to do with healthcare solutions and debt collection.
Mr. Chairman,
I've amended that.
Director Slacky was having some health
So-
issues, could not make it tonight.
I understand. We've done this twice last year. Why are we doing this yet again?
This is to go forward, they've recreated the books had a better handle on how much is outstanding, will be outstanding, and this is to cover the
And
difference.
the magic words are?
It's reimbursable, you're
and
going to get it out.
more money
Yes.
coming in,
Yes.
possibly.
This is additional revenue, you collect additional revenue, this is their piece.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions? Motion? Mr. Bergdorf, second Mr. O'Brien. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. Authorizing number 29, the submission of a grant application and acceptance with the New York State Department of State regarding the countywide resiliency grant program.
All right, so this is a grant we asked for authorization to apply to actually in early 2017. It took the State Department a while to award the money, but fortunately we were awarded.
They're doing a lot of shared services work right now. So
What's that?
I said they're doing a lot of work on shared services.
They are, they could use some more staff and they're working hard, but,
So what is a resiliency grant?
Thank you.
sure, so this is, it's
resilient.
familiar with the hazard mitigation
Keeps coming
plan
back.
grant. It has some similarities to that, but it is explicitly focused
Can't kill it.
more on the threats associated with climate change and extreme weather. So it follows a process where you first do an identification of your assets, you do a risk assessment, and then you come up with both policies and specific projects to build resiliency into the county and its assets to,
Like our parking garage?
that would be a great example for future work.
So how much are we, how much is in this grant?
138,000, no county share, all state.
Also magic words. Mr. Bergdorf, motion, second Mr. Joyce, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. 30, amending resolution number 574 for 2018 regarding the conveyance of real property in the town of Rensselaerville. We have a series of these going on.
There's a cute church in Rensselaerville.
Dave, I don't know if you want me to comment on this, I can unless you want to speak.
If you wanna handle it,
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this was previously passed last year, this is a conveyance. At the time, the information we had said it was in the town of Bethlehem, or excuse me, in the town of, yes, Bethlehem, instead it's in Rensselaerville, so we have to make an amendment.
Slightly,
Let's see, Scotland.
GPS is off.
Motion, Mr. Joyce, second Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. 31, authorizing corrections of the tax rolls of the town of Rensselaerville. Oh, now you, all right. You're going all that trouble to come here. Go ahead, say a few words.
Hello. Welcome back.
How are you?
Thanks for having me. These are just simple corrections, clerical errors mostly, just to clean up the tax rolls for the towns.
Corrections on whose part?
So the correction on 31 Rensselaerville. This was, the Board of Assessment Review made a reduction in the assessment on the parcel, but that change never got into the RPS system. Therefore, the taxes were generated on the wrong assessment. So it's clerical error on the assessor's
Okay,
office.
motion?
Motion.
Mr. O'Brien, second Ms. Willingham, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 32, authorizing corrections for Bethlehem as well. Motion. Motion, Mr. Higgins, second Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye. 33.
Opposed? No. Unanimous. 33, authorizing the refund of real property taxes to Scotland.
Motion.
Refunds? This is good.
Yeah, so this one, they
Everybody wants
paid
to go on
twice.
They paid?
They
okay.
paid their school taxes twice because of the timing in which they paid. It got re-levied onto the county, so they paid it again.
It's not because they prepaid in 2017 because of the federal tax changes in 2018.
That's correct, they did not do
Okay,
that.
okay. Motion, Mr. Joyce, second Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 34, authorizing the levy upon the city of Cohoes. Mr. Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you will recall, we passed a series of levies at the end of last year. This is doing the same thing for Cohoes. Cohoes has their own schedule in which they do their levy process, so it's the same thing for Cohoes.
And 35.
Same thing.
All right, so motion for
you okay?
34 and 35. Ms. Willingham, second Mr. Joyce. We just do them separately, whatever you want. Motion.
You're not getting burned out,
Motion to
right?
combine.
Motion to combine.
Ms. Willingham, second Mr. Joyce, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Now, so, together, motion to approve 34 and 35.
Motion.
Ms. Willingham, second Mr. O'Brien, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous, 34 and 35. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Motion to adjourn.